Hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks for the new people who joined into this room. I am beyond excited to welcome this team of people who is really kind of by happenstance. I'll give the formal bio of Marlene, let her introduce her team, but then I'll give kind of how this transpired. So Marlene Watkins is the founder of Our Lady of Lourdes Hospitality North American Volunteers, the first Lourdes hospitality outside Europe and the first in the Americas. In 25 years as a volunteer, Marlene has led more than 200 pilgrimages to Lourdes for more than 6,000 pilgrims, including the seriously ill and profoundly disabled, with medical, adult, university, and youth volunteers. Marlene has also guided Lourdes virtual pilgrimage experiences across North America and in Europe, Asia, South America, and Africa. She is the author of the best-selling book, Everyday Miracles of Lourdes, 20 Extraordinary Experiences Along the Way to the Grotto, published by EWTN Publishing. Marlene hosts the popular weekly series, My Lourdes Faith Journey on EWTN. She has appeared on CBS, EWTN, PBS, BBC. In 2015, Marlene was named Our Sunday Visitor Catholic of the Year and is a speaker at conferences, events, on radio shows, and podcasts. Probably more importantly, I'm guessing, she would say she is a wife, mother, grandmother, secular Franciscan, and member of the Hospitality Notre Dame de Lourdes. She and her husband Bill live in Syracuse, New York, or in the Lourdes Mobile RV, traveling America the Beautiful to share the gospel message of Lourdes. So you can tell I'm just flabbergasted that we were able to bring this together for a breakout session. So how did this happen? In August, when we took the Nursing Academy to Lourdes as part of the tail end of our pilgrimage, just by happenstance, she was there. And she can maybe tell you we've had kind of this ongoing discussion about University of Mary and how we might be more involved in volunteering in Lourdes. And so she took it upon herself to really spend probably the next 4 or 5 days with us, pretty much 24/7. And the things that we were able to do with her were just incredible. So we are incredibly, incredibly honored that not only she came, but she brought some teammates with her who I will let her introduce. So please give a warm welcome to Marlene and her team.
So thank you so much for having us. I was walking through Rosary Square and my phone rang, and I usually don't pick it up in the sanctuary. It was a number I didn't recognize, and it was Monsignor Shea, and I had never heard of him. I didn't know who he was. I totally embarrassed myself yesterday because I commented after Mass that he had a beautiful homily, and I asked him if he'd ever been to Lourdes. So he's my phone buddy. I had never met him in person. But he is amazing and fabulous, and that's how he came here. He called on the phone and asked if I was in Lourdes and if there was some way that I could welcome the students and the faculty that were there. And it was such a blessing. It's such an incredible grace to be here. But I'd like to introduce Dr. Mary Jo O'Sullivan. And her bio and her CV is so long and so extensive that when we were asked to reduce it down to 100 characters, I said that was a literary crime. She's an OBGYN, emeritus of Miami University. She's come with us, I don't know, so many times we can't count. She's courageous and amazing. She just came back from medical mission in Jamaica. She and I have traveled together to China to bring the very sick out of China, which is an incredible experience and totally different than what we usually do. We bring people that are sick, that are seriously ill, and her CV is so impressive. All her information was provided here to the university. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Mary Jo O'Sullivan. We're going to share this presentation. I don't know how they do some.
Just hit the enter, Marlene.
So this is beautiful, Bernadette. For those of you, can I ask how many of you know this message of Lourdes? You know the story of Lourdes? Okay, and some who do not. So to explain it, in 1858, the Mother of God came down from heaven and appeared in the grotto, which is a small cave on the side of the Pyrenees Mountains, to a little girl, illiterate, named Bernadette Subirouz. And she's the daughter of a miller. They were very poor, and we say uneducated. She did not know how to read and write. She does wind up in the infirmary after the apparitions when she enters religious life as a sister. The physicians say she was the best pharmacy tech they had. She was the best somewhat nurse that they had. All of the sisters in the convent who were sick would want Bernadette to be the one to care for them. So she was an uncertified medical professional. And what it really made her the best was that she loved without measure. And that's significant because Bernadette's parents were millers. They wound up losing their home and their business, and measurement was part of the reason. If they had measured more carefully, it would have made the difference between profit and loss, and they would have kept their home and their business. Instead, they fell into poverty. So later in her life, when she says love without measure, it has profound meaning to her. And you're all scientists, so measurement, is so significant. And when University of Mary was in Lourdes, Father Shea, not Monsignor Shea, but Father Shea said in his homily in the crypt that he hopes the nursing school here will take the tagline from Bernadette, it's the one we use at Lourdes Volunteers, to love without measure, because that really is the measurement of what you do, and it brings the humanity into what you do in medicine. So this is beautiful Bernadette. She was the first Catholic saint to have been photographed. She's incorrupt, so she's not oxygenated or she died. When they exhumed her body, they found her to be beautiful, and she's still in Nevers, France. Dr. Mary Jo.
I'm supposed to give you this. I wanted to go back to the picture, but thank you all also for being here and for listening to us. And I hope the presentation that we give you is going to answer a lot of questions for you, or maybe even enlighten you about Lourdes and its message and about what we do at North American Lourdes Volunteers. The point I wanted to make about Bernadette and that picture was, if you ever get to Lourdes, one of the things I would suggest you do is somehow or another find a way to get to Nevers and to see the incorrupt Bernadette, because actually she is gorgeous. And I cannot put it any other way, because I know Marlene arranged for me to drive two of the nurses to Nevers, and I'm like, why am I going to Nevers? This is a nuisance. But anyway, we went, and I was ever so grateful, because to see Bernadette there, incorrupt, was just, even now, it still fills my heart, my soul, and my mind. So let's move on. Okay, so this is the group of our team in Lourdes doing what Our Lady asked Bernadette when she said to her that she wanted a church built there and she wanted the people to process. So here we are getting ready for the Eucharistic procession. That's what you're seeing in the afternoon. And this is all of North American Lourdes Volunteers team. These are our patients, our pilgrims, I should say, and our help, our support teams, and everything together. In the front of this group, to your right, are the Chinese. And then behind the Chinese are other American pilgrims and all of our workers. And you can see the youth pushing the chairs and the nurses in their uniforms. And I'll show you another picture. You can see one of the nurses way over on the left-hand side, but they're on the other side. When we process on either side of the pilgrims. First of all, to keep them together. And secondly of all, in case anything happens, we're right there. And we also have with us, as you can see in the very back of the team, that red wagon. That's our emergency equipment in case anything happens as we go along. Our objectives are to love, and this is really important. When I say really loving, when I say love, when Marlene mentions love without measure, what we're really talking about is every one of us who's on one of these pilgrimages is committed to caring. I mean, really caring. It's not just, okay, we're going there and we'll be there and we'll minister what we have to do. No. It's really about caring. And as I develop this, hopefully you will understand that even better. We try to show this in our caring and our loving as we prepare for the pilgrimage journey, and I'll explain how that goes on in a few minutes too. We develop supportive care plans for each of our pilgrims and also for some of the other people who come along with us, like the advanced team or the youth, because we need to know everything medically about everybody that's with us so that we're comfortable with whatever may happen on the tour, on the trip, on the pilgrimage. We try to continue that, and I'll explain some of this in some of my other slides. We try to continue that throughout the preparation process, okay? And then the whole time we're there, we're watching everybody, we're eating with everybody, we're participating with everybody, we're talking to everybody. And then when I say everybody, I'm not just talking about the pilgrims either. I'm talking about the entire team, the youth, everybody. And it's a real family. We eat together. We do everything together. And then when it comes time to bring our pilgrims home and we separate off because the advanced team and the youth and everybody goes at a different time, we, the medical team with the pilgrims, we may be 2 flights, we may be 3 flights. Okay, like this last trip, we were a flight out of Minneapolis, St. Paul, a flight out of Miami, of JFK, because I live in Miami, I do that. A flight out of JFK, and what was the third flight?
Los Angeles.
Los Angeles, right, that's right.
And 2 out of JFK.
Oh, that's right, JFK 1 and JFK 2. So there's a physician, a head physician on each of the flights, plus there may be 1 or 2 other assistant physicians that are helping out, nurses, physical therapists, respiratory therapists, depending upon what our needs are as to how many different kinds of medical personnel may be accompanying us on the trip. And on the way back, it's the same team that took the people to Lourdes are taking the people back home. In addition to that, you'll see in a later slide, once we get back home, what happens. Then our whole aim, is to have the charism of love, support, being kind, being there.
So who are we? They were saying in the introduction, we're the first Lourdes hospitality outside of Europe. So at the time of the apparitions in the 19th century, in old houses, how they have like 2 big double doors, that's so your casket could go in and out. Because if you were sick or you were wheelchair bound, you stayed home. You basically always stayed in your house. It was unusual for sick people or disabled people to leave their homes. When the miracles began to happen, and I think Dr. Mike in the next talk is going to touch a little bit about the miracles that take place in Lourdes. There's a medical bureau that examines the people who claim that they have been cured and healed. There's almost 8,000 of those cases that science cannot explain, 70 that the Catholic Church calls miracles. When the miracles began to happen, people left their homes. The train tracks were laid in 1866, just a few years after the apparitions, and they would arrive in on the trains and then they couldn't get off. The good, simple people of the mountains and the Pyrenees there in Lourdes would hear the train whistle. They would stop in the fields and at the mill, and they would go and help the people off the trains. The bishop saw that, and he said, this is a grace. And if you become an association in the church, this grace will flow and live beyond you. But if you don't, it can die when you die. So that's the Hospitality Notre Dame de Lourdes, which we belong to. Those are the ones who come and welcome the sick, and many of us do that are also in Lourdes volunteers. And then the first group came down from Paris in 1883, and they are the first hospitality to bring the sick. Now, from Paris to Lourdes doesn't sound very far, but back then it was a 2-day journey. And so there are 270 of them, but there were never any outside of Europe. So we're the first ones outside of Europe, but because there are no others in our founding, we also help the people from Asia and Africa and other places to help teach them so they can also do the same. We are a public association of the Christian faithful in the Catholic Church. That means we're under the authority of the bishop. We report to the Vatican every year in Rome. We are a U.S. nonprofit 501c3. In French, that means Loi 1901. So it's the same thing, being a nonprofit. That means we're all volunteers. That means we're paying our own way. Everybody does. It is a tax deduction, by the way. Not that we do it for that reason. And we are volunteers, in capital letters. We are volunteers. So we are laity, we are medical, we are clergy, university students, youth, all together in one family. So we were founded in 2002. We taken over 250 pilgrimages. It's over 7,000 pilgrims now and volunteers. We share the message of Lourdes. It has been in all 50 states and in 26 countries. Our charism is love, as Dr. Mary Jo said, expressed in family with joy. We share the gospel message of Lourdes in virtual experiences where we bring this to people who most likely will never go to Lourdes. And we've done it on EWTN during the pandemic to millions of people, and then also in parishes, in schools, and in prisons. We serve the sick and the suffering at Lourdes and at home, and we serve the world of the sanctuary in Lourdes, France. We treat each person as Christ and his wheelchair as Mary would. And so Dr. Mary Jo is going to talk about who we take care of, because most people don't realize sick people like this can travel internationally with us.
I'm going to tell you a story about a trip out of Chicago many years ago. I was very early on in my trips to Lourdes. My sister and I were both at that time going to Lourdes. My sister happened to be an ICU nurse. Actually, it was her idea that we should volunteer for Lourdes. Anyway, we were on a trip out of Chicago, and we knew we had a pilgrim whom we had not ever talked to himself, but to his wife. We had no idea just exactly how bad this pilgrim was, but we knew he was a paraplegic. And it's a sad, sad story, because he was an anesthesiologist, and he was coming out of the elevator. He was going into the elevator, and people were coming out. He backed out and tripped and hit the back of his neck against a couch or something that was in the hallway.
Metal bench,
thank you. And he was totally paralyzed. So we're in Chicago at the airport, and he's there to get on the flight to check in, and they refused to allow him to go on the flight. So my sister and Melinda, who's our head nurse and has been our head nurse for many, many years, really argued, because we already had an airline tickets. We had everything. There was no reason why they couldn't have put this guy on the plane. We had to really fight to get this guy on the plane. Okay, that's the first part. Then when I say he was paralyzed, I mean really from here down. He could breathe, thanks be to God. He wasn't on a ventilator that time. Then we get to the next flight, was the Po flight, and we'd already known we were going to have a problem. How are we going to get him on this much smaller aircraft? How are we going to get him seated? Well, of course, they had their concerns too, as they do at Charles de Gaulle. We're taking that flight from Charles de Gaulle to Po. It seems every once in a while we create major problems with our patients, our pilgrims. And so this was one of them. And finally, we got the airline to understand that if we could just put this seat down and put that seat down, we could put that chair with him across two seats in the back of the aircraft. And that's what we did. So, I mean, he was the first one of our challenges, our major challenges of getting pilgrims to Lourdes. And from that, I learned you can take anybody. Okay, you can do it. So anyway, saying that, the pilgrims that we take really can be the sickest of the sick. Okay, they can be on ventilators, and then we need a respiratory therapist. So that has to be planned for. The quadriplegics, and we have to worry about their mobility needs. Anybody who's in a wheelchair, we have to worry about how they're going to get on and off the aircraft, what happens with the wheelchair. If they have motorized wheelchairs, arrangements have to be made that those wheelchairs can be fit on Air France. And that's exactly the work that the office has done in Syracuse to even get Air France to coordinate their storage areas to accommodate the kind of equipment, more mechanical equipment and wheelchair equipment that our pilgrims may need. We also have terminal illness patients who need IV infusions, sometimes chemotherapy while we're there. It's not on the trip, thank God. While we're there, we have patients who are blind, who are deaf. We even have people that we have one woman who has her daughter. What's her name? Pam. Pam Ryan used to travel with us, and Pam Ryan had a deaf daughter, so she knew how to do sign language. And so we take figures and pilgrims, and Pam was great with the sign language. Recently, we had somebody who was the same, a pilgrim and his mom, I think it was. They came with us that way. So then the other thing that isn't obvious in some of our pilgrims is those inner wounds, okay? The abortion, the domestic abuse, the surgery, the clergy abuse. People who are hurting for so many years of their life that they sometimes don't even recognize what their hurt is until they get to Lourdes. And then somehow it comes out. And that's the wonderful thing about the accompaniment that comes with us in the mental health care team. So it's not just the nurses, it's not just the doctors. We have physical therapists, and we have lots of mental health support. And this is really vital. So this is, unfortunately, I don't like pictures, okay? But Marlene put this in. But this is the team of, on my immediate right is one of our nurses. Next to her is a physical therapist, and next to her is the second one of our nurses. And the whole idea is, as I've already explained, we are with the pilgrims all day, every day. Not only do we walk with them, but we eat with them. We go on the tours with them. We run a medical emergency kind of thing, morning and evening. So we have a medical room that's open, morning and evening, and is staffed. At night, there's always people on call. The nurses split 4 hours shift at nights, and the doctors also take a full night call. The nurses stay up and they walk around. I used to do that, but I'm getting too old for that now. But I used to be the one that took the call the first night because I can't sleep on an aircraft. And once I can't sleep, I'm wide awake then until the following night. So I would stay up all night. It was great. I mean, I enjoyed that because that first night was the night you could see how things were really going to happen. Okay, how were people really going to settle in? Now they've traveled all this long way, and I'll explain that to you. It's long, and now they have to settle into a new environment. Okay, now the other thing we do, and you'll see when I tell you about special care plans, we also accompany our pilgrims if they have to go to the ER or are being hospitalized. We have a team leader, a nurse, and a doctor goes to the local hospital with the pilgrim. We have the records of their medical records so that we can give that information to the hospital, and they love it because now they don't have to take so much time trying to find out what's going on in a different language type situation where they can read it and put it together quickly for translation purposes. If a patient is hospitalized, a pilgrim is hospitalized, we're in the hospital. So they're never alone. Okay, the other thing is if they have to stay, and I don't know whether they have this on another slide or not. If they have to stay, then a team is developed to stay with the pilgrim until the pilgrim is ready to leave the hospital, God willing, and not in the box. Leave the hospital alive and go home. And so far, I don't think we've ever had a death, have we? We've never had a death on a pilgrimage, but we've had to leave. We've had pilgrims have to stay in the hospital after we leave. Okay, so let's talk about how does a pilgrim get to Lourdes in the first place. So they find out this information either online by going to North American Lourdes Volunteers, or they call the Syracuse office by phone number directly. They can get their applications online, and then those applications are sent into the office. Once the office receives the application, the office then calls the pilgrim and talks to them to make direct contact, how they can do, what the issues are, what can they financially afford or not afford. Is there something that we're going to have to support them to go in some way or another? Immediately, then the head nurse and the head physicians are notified of the pilgrim, phone numbers are given to us, and we then, the head nurse particularly, calls each pilgrim first and gets the information from the pilgrim about their medical history, their medications, their physicians, who they are, their contacts, and then we send out information, the release of records to each of the physicians to try to get as much medical information on each pilgrim as we possibly can. So we need to have complete medical records on everybody if we can possibly get them. Is it possible sometimes that we don't get them? Yes. Sometimes they just don't get them. And we have to do the best we can with the information that the pilgrim gives us. We then have to discuss with the pilgrim, once we know that we're going to be able to take the pilgrim, a lot about international travel. What is it going to involve? How long the trip is? What it's like at Charles de Gaulle Airport. Charles de Gaulle Airport is amazing. Okay. To get from the plane coming from the United States to the plane going to Poe, which is the town we have to go to, is a 1.5 mile walk. So a lot of people can't do that. And we have to convince the pilgrims that you really need to take a wheelchair. Now, that's another event, because it's not a simple thing. Because you can't imagine what it's like going through security. Even I had one time, we have a paraplegic who comes with us every year. He's born with cerebral palsy, sorry. He was born with cerebral palsy, Jamie. And every year, Jamie has been coming with us to Lourdes. One year, it was horrible how security called the police to actually do the search, a body search on Jamie. I mean, these are the kinds of obstacles we have. We have the situation in which when we have people on wheelchairs, a medical person has to accompany that person. And we usually try to do 2 or 3, sometimes 4 together. We can get all kinds of fights, and that's the only way I can describe it. Resistance, and then you have to fight for the patient, fight for the pilgrim, so that you can go with that pilgrim and threaten and say, listen, do you want this person to die on you? I think that's a good idea. One of us comes with them, and then you finally convince them. So it's a battle, and it's a never ceasing battle, but it's a challenge, and sometimes it's an amazing challenge. And you take a lot of gaff too, but that's the way it is. But the patient, the pilgrim has to understand what this is really about, because we need their cooperation. If they don't cooperate with what we want for them to do, then it's going to be a disaster. So there's a lot of conversation that goes on, convincing a pilgrim you need to be in a wheelchair. We really don't understand walking 1.5 miles. We don't have that much time sometimes between flights. And even if we do, you're exhausted. You've been on this flight all night. You've even come from your home place maybe before you boarded this flight. So it's a lot to convince people that you need to be in a chair. Not everybody does, but it's a lot to convince them. Now, getting back to the supportive care plans, I'm going to show you what it kind of looks like. But these are very detailed plans about the patient, their history, their medications, their needs, what the physician says, their local physician says they need when they get there, how we will handle them when they're there, all detailed. And then every one of them is discussed on Zoom calls. We do all of this information is put on Google Docs. And Google Docs, of course, protects the information, so we're HIPAA sensitive, and we have to be extremely careful about that, as you well know. Medications and dosages, I mentioned all of this just a few moments ago, so I'm not going to go to that. So we have the Zoom calls. We start the Zoom calls usually 2 to 3 months before the trip. And on those Zoom calls is the whole team, the medical team, the nursing team, the mental health team. If we have respiratory therapists coming, whatever we have, everybody attends those Zoom calls. And each pilgrim is discussed in detail. Questions come up, people make suggestions, and we follow through with all of these and add them to the supportive care plan. This is what a supportive plan, the first page really looks like. And it really has just the basic information that we need. And then we go on to their physical assessments. And then on the other side, the second part of the supportive plan is the more detailed information as we need to have, but diet, what medical change, and this is ongoing, by the way, because as you are working with the pilgrim, things change. And so we have to be intimately in contact with your physicians, making the changes on their medical records. Sometimes when we're discussing a pilgrim, one of the physicians or one of the nurses brings up something, oh yeah, let's check on this. This is a good idea, we need to find this out. So another phone call back to the physician or the care provider to see what their sense is about this. If we have people who need particularly infusions while we're away, while we're in Lourdes, and let's say if somebody has some type of a genetic disease, as we did relatively recently, and they might have to have a particular type of an infusion, their physician makes the contact with somebody in the area that we're going to, so that we can make contact with that particular physician who has that particular interest and that particular genetic abnormality, and can do the type of infusion that patient or that pilgrim might need. So it's a lot of work, it's a lot of time, It's a lot of loving care the entire time, and I cannot tell you, really, it is lots of input from everybody. And we have to make all kinds of adjustments even when we travel. Motion sickness we have to think about. Medication timing we have to work out. If the patient has ventilators, we have batteries we have to figure out, okay? And all of the batteries have to be stored in the aircraft, okay? Same thing with medications, and I'll go on to that in just a few minutes. So as I spent some time discussing this whole wheelchair business and how the needs are, and convincing even accompanying family of the importance of perhaps of being in a wheelchair. If one of their members is in a wheelchair, one of their families in a wheelchair, because it is ideal to have, if you have a pilgrim who needs a chair and a accompanying family member, maybe that family member should be in a wheelchair in order to accompany their family member through where we're going. And they're like, well, I can walk. Yeah, but you're going to be separated from them. If you on the walking part, you're not going to be separated. You're going to be separated from your family. So we have to a lot of convincing about that. Then all the equipment that we have to bring has to be cleared by Air France, and that's the office takes care of all of that. Like I mentioned, that carrying, we have to tell the pilgrims, by the way, that you have to carry 3 weeks of medication on the aircraft. They look at you, 3 weeks? No, I'll just put it in my luggage. No. 3 weeks of medication on the aircraft over your head. Okay? Not in your luggage. Why? Luggage gets lost. Okay, look at Marlene. She just got her luggage from Rome. And luggage get lost, and then we don't have medicine. So we have to do that as well. Okay, we also have to plan on oxygen in flight. So if we have people with pulmonary problems, we have to think about that. Even if they're not on a ventilator, we may have to make reservations with the airlines to have in-flight oxygenation in case we need it. Because when you go up altitude, we have to think about the oxygen supply and the differences in oxygenation at that time as well. Needles, they have to carry their needles on the aircraft because the medication is needles. That all has to go through security, okay? And can you imagine the time that takes, trying to get those things through security? I can remember one time we were going through security, and I think we had this unbelievable numbers of bottles of formula, and each bottle had to go through the machine. Each bottle. It takes, sometimes to get in through security takes a very, very long time. So that becomes important too in timing flights, because the office has to make sure that there's enough time for us to make those flights. We also have, each of the patients has to carry not only all of their 3 weeks of their medications on board, but they have to have a change of clothes on board as well, okay? Because we never know. Something may happen, they may get sick, they may need to change their clothes during the flight. They may have a long layover, so it's a good idea that they have a change of clothes. So I think you kind of get the message that the special care plans are really adapted to the needs of each individual patient or pilgrim. And they become our family. We are their family, they are our family. As I said, we eat with them, we do everything with them. And the nurses, God bless the nurses. I mean, they are amazing in what they do. And what we want, we ask our nurses, I think I should have gone back a couple slides, but in the beginning, when we were first going, I got the sense that the nurses looked to me, they were taking over care. And I thought, this is not right. They're not supposed to take over care. These families take care of their sick at home. And they're here in a pilgrimage, and I kind of, it was just getting uncomfortable. And then finally, I sat with the nurses and said, listen, we're here to help them, not take over care. Let the families take the care of their own pilgrims, and we assist them. We ask them, how can I help you? How do you want me to help you? Would you like a day off? Would you like a night out on the town while you're here in Lourdes? And they'll wait, we can take care of your family for you. So we don't take over care, we help. So we give them, keep the dignity of being allowed to take care of themselves and their own families. Well, this priest, let me tell you, he is wonderful. He is a psychologist. He's from Nigeria. I really don't remember how he even got, Marlene can tell you how he even got started with us. But he's just so kind, so gentle, so knowing, and so perceptive. And he has a beautiful singing voice. So he's our doctor of the soul. He's also our head psychologist. He's on every one of our conference calls, whether it's the Zoom calls or any other kinds of calls that we have. He's on them all, as the rest is so much of the mental health care team. And we have several mental health nurses, one of which seems to come with us on every single flight. In fact, my niece, who came on one of our flights and has her own issues, seems to have this contact with her all the time. And I'm like, Mary Kay, could you just leave Joni alone? Let Joni have some time of her own. But anyway, they continue contact. So one of the things that we also have to do for some of the pilgrims who are really very bad, we have to open this end-of-life discussion. What's going to happen on an aircraft if you have an arrest? We don't have an ICU on an aircraft. Okay, we do carry, the aircraft has an AED. We also carry our own AEDs, our own ambu bags. Sometimes we have our own needles and syringes, IV infusion bottles. We have all the equipment to start an IV if we really need to with us. But we have to discuss that with the pilgrim. And it's a difficult discussion sometimes to say, okay, what are your wishes if you have an arrest on the aircraft? What do you're terminally ill. Do you want us to resuscitate you? What exactly do you want? And we have to get that clear and what we are capable of doing on an aircraft. So they have to fully understand that. Okay. Fortunately, praise God, we haven't had it yet. But we've come close. We haven't had it yet. So what about these special care plans? We have them, not only are they on Google Docs, but because we're traveling, we can't get Google Docs on our travels. So we have multiple binders. Each team leader has a binder, each head nurse has a binder, and each head physician has a binder on the aircraft. In Lourdes, we have binders in Lourdes where we have the clinics, what we call our clinics, our morning and afternoon clinics. Every single member of the team, whether it's a pilgrim, youth, advanced team, no matter who it is, anybody who is attached to us has a medical care plan in those binders, so that when we are in Lourdes and they come to the emergency room, at least we have a medical care, we have their history from the past, we know what their issues are, and again, if they have to go to the hospital. I already talked about the change. Oh yes, another thing we do, meeting pilgrims at the aircraft, at the airport. I'm trying to figure out how
That's
I should
another
say
slide.
that.
That's another slide.
Yeah, I know, but I see that last word there, where it says seats, pilgrims, we're gonna come back to that. Okay, so we work with the pilgrims, we're in touch with the pilgrims from the time they leave their home, the leaders are, or the nurse or the doctor, until they get to the airport of departure. Sometimes they stay overnight somewhere. We meet them at the airport. Now, sometimes we're not quite sure what we expect to see because we get a picture of what they are and then we see them. And sometimes the picture is far better than we can ever imagine. I mean, you think you're gonna have this really bad. No, they're fine. I can tell you recently about two or 3 years ago. I'm usually outside at JFK by the door of the terminal with my coat on, my white coat on, and my binder, so that they might know who we are. And we know they're coming because we're in contact with them. And so we knew this family was coming, this older woman with her husband. And he had been quite sick. He hadn't been walking, was unable to walk. And, you have to be careful when you're out there like that because you don't know that this person that you're looking at, is that person coming with you or not? So I'm out there and I see this woman get out of a taxi and then her husband kind of barely get out of the taxi and again lean against a pole. And she goes in, and I'm looking right at her, she looked over at me, but she went right into the airfield and she's arguing to try to get, I followed her in while I'm keeping my eye on him. I followed her in, I see her arguing to try to get a wheelchair. So I finally went over to her and I said, are you looking for North American Lourdes volunteer? She said, yes, that's why I'm trying to get a wheelchair. I need it for my husband, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, we get the wheelchair. I didn't expect that, but what I want to tell you is the fun part of it was he was in the wheelchair all the time. We get to Lourdes the next morning. He gets up in the morning and they're getting ready to come to breakfast. And he says to his wife, are you ready? And she's standing by the door and he's behind her. So she doesn't see him. Are you ready? She says, yes, I'm ready. I said to you, he says, are you ready? And she said, I'm ready. Yes, come on, let's go. We need to get the wheelchair. He gets up and he walks. And no more wheelchair. He didn't have the wheelchair for the rest of the time. Now, do I think that's a miracle? No. I think that he just, whatever it was, he got to Lourdes or whatever he needed to get himself going, he got going. But it was just so impressive. And he was so sick before that trip. So that may be part of the problem. But he's still alive and he's doing fine. And they're an amazing couple too. Okay, so continue on. I'm really probably talking too long. Okay, so what I wanted to really get at was what you see on paper is not necessarily what you see when they come to the airport. And you have to be prepared for that. We all have to be prepared for that. And that's why it's very important that we have them coming to the airport hours before they have to depart so that we can not only get them registered and checked in before everybody else is checking in, but also to get a sense of what they are on a one-to-one basis there. Who really needs who really needs a wheelchair? Who probably doesn't, but we're going to give it to you anyway because you should. What kind of arrangements are we going to have to think about now when we get on the aircraft? Because while we have one set of seating arrangements, that's one thing about the airplanes. For some reason or another, by some contract Lourdes Volunteers has, we don't get a seat assignment as a group. We're seated everywhere. And our leaders try very hard when they're checking us in to try to get us all at least in one area. But that doesn't always work out either. Other passengers get their seats that they want, but ours, no. So we end up.
We should explain it. It's the FAA. So we have the FAA here in the US. They have it in France. So they only allow so many people in a wheelchair with mobility issues or medical issues on each plane. And then it flips when you go over the water. Who can sit in the aisle seat flips. So for us, how a person in a wheelchair would be seated in the end seat and then the person next to them. That's the opposite there. You have to have the mobile person in the aisle seat to be able to lift the person out. But it's the opposite in the US. So the two things clash. And it's always, we call it musical seats.
Musical seats.
It's
exactly.
difficult.
And the poor airline personnel, the poor stewardesses, they go crazy because we're flipping all the time. But they know who we are because we introduce ourselves, we explain what we're doing, we explain who we are, why we are, where we're going. And they actually are, Air France particularly, are very accommodating. Once they find out what we are, you're going to Lourdes. Lourdes Delta is not quite the same. It's a game. Now this is Jamie. Jamie was born with CP, and Jamie gets to go to Lourdes every year. And this is Jamie's survival. This is how he really makes it from one year to the next. Jamie can't feed himself. He can't even bless himself. But Jamie has a personality that wins you over like you cannot imagine. And he's just a wonderful young man. Well, he's getting middle-aged now, and he's a wonderful man. So yes, we have to make a lot of on-the-fly adjustments at the airport itself, which we know then are going to extend not only for the travel, but also in Lourdes itself. I already talked about what they need to carry on the plane with them, and that the nurses and the doctors, we have sort of an assigned group that we each take care of, but I, for one, don't sleep on an aircraft, so I'm up walking around the aircraft about every hour or so, just checking on everyone and seeing how they're doing. The nurses will do the same thing. The nurses usually take care of their own team, but they take care of everybody. So it's like we share everything, so we can assist them on the flights. The same goes for the family members. When we're accompanying members of their families, we do special care plans on them as well, so that we know all of their medical histories and what they need and what we might have to think of in terms of caring for them, even when they are in Lourdes.
So if it seems a little daunting, it's really not. It's a great joy to do all of this, and it's a collaborative effort. So one of our head nurses is here, Crystal Kozel. She's also getting her master's in theology, but she can tell you about the planning that Mary Jo's talking about. Dr. Mike Scope is here also giving the next talk. But we all come together to make this possible over time, and work with the leadership team and the people in the office, and it really does come together in a beautiful way. We stay in a 900 hospital bed facility that's in the sanctuary. If you were Our Lady, the Mother of God in the grotto, and you were looking out, you would see a building across from her, and that's the building we stay in. It's where Pope John Paul II stayed when he came in 2004. It's completely handicap accessible. There's oxygen that is right in the walls if we need it accessible, and the medical room that Dr. Mary Jo is referring to. But this is all completely empty. We have to put all of our medical supplies in there. We have storage that we keep in France for each time that we come over. We also make a list of supplies that are needed. The medical team tells us we access them and have everything there. They have configurations of rooms. These are the hospital beds that 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6 bedded rooms. So if we have a family of 4 or 5, they can fit into a 6-bedded room. Sometimes our nursing students, they'll be in a bed of 6 bedded rooms and share. There are 2 toilet rooms and 2 shower rooms that are both handicap accessible in the 6-bedded rooms. And then there's one like in the 1, 2, and 3. And then this is again overlooking the sanctuary, but it keeps us all together. We have specialized diets and meals. It is like hospital food, but our team, this is some of our team here, they make it wonderful. They set the tables beautifully. We have supplemental food that we make. We have snacks that are available for everybody throughout the day and night because we're flipping times. They do everything with great joy. We have great French wine. We have what we call the A-team. They go by the advanced team, but they're really the awesome team. They come ahead of us by a few days. They do have a medical team with them also. They care for university students that come with us. They care for young people. We have a teenage program in June for school students for catechesis. And they do all of our dining services. So the food is prepared and given to us. We do the supplementing. They do the serving. They do all the cleaning and sanitation. There's really strict rules of sanitation there. They do all the housekeeping of all of our rooms. So in other words, the building is there, the food is provided, but we provide everything else. The medical room is there, but we have our own medical team and we have all of our own medical supplies. They are also our transport team. So they move everybody in their wheelchairs and in these specialized vehicles called voitures. They look like a rickshaw that we use inside the sanctuary with people on stretchers. Yes, we do. And how we move about in the sanctuary safely. They all get training as they come in, as all of our team does. And then sometimes we are known as frequent flyers. We're the American frequent flyers at the ER. And we do have our pilgrims are hospitalized there at times. So Mary Jo is going to talk about that.
I think I did.
Yeah.
I think I already covered most of that. So I'm going to move on to the next slide because I talked about staying with them, accompanying them home if they have to stay over and so on. So this is, when Our Lady asked Bernadette that she wanted a church built there and she wanted the people in procession. And so there are the processions are the Blessed Sacrament procession in the afternoon, every single afternoon around 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock? 5 o'clock. Every afternoon at 5 o'clock. And when we're in that procession, we are so blessed that so many times we are right behind the Blessed Sacrament. And what they do also is they pick 4 medical team, for the medical team to process directly behind the Blessed Sacrament. It doesn't have to be our group. It could be any four medical team. But when we're there, we're lucky enough that most of the time it's our group that they pick for people. And then our group also helps carry not carry the Blessed Sacrament, but they carry Our Lady in the evening procession. I'm going to get to that. So anyway, this is the team, as you can see, and if there's any doubt who they are, there's those green bags that say North American Lourdes Volunteers behind everybody, so everybody knows who we are. And notice the code of dress. I want to point this out because this is really something that has struck me in Lourdes so often. Nobody has shorts on. The men all have pants. The girls wear dresses or slacks. Okay. Yet when we go there and we see the people, it bothers me particularly from the Irish, because I happen to be an Irish citizen, and it bothers me particularly to see the Irish in short shorts, and I'm like, oh my God. But anyway, and I'm so proud of our team because our team is just so nicely dressed. And that's thanks to Marlene and the code of dress that we are supposed to have. Nurses have to wear white uniforms, white dresses, not white pants, white dresses, and usually blue sweaters, ideally. And I can remember my sister going out and buying all that equipment. And then the doctors have to wear white coats. They don't have to wear dresses, but the girls mostly all wear dresses. The men, of course, wear slacks. But it's the code of dress that is another part of who we are. Okay. Now, on the trip home, of course, everybody has had we have two meetings, by the way. I think I have it somewhere there, but we have two meetings. One meeting the day after we arrive, and the pilgrims can talk about why they're there. Okay, and then we introduce everybody. So the pilgrims all know who everybody is from all of the teams, who the leaders are, who the advanced care team is, who the youth are. And then at the very end of the trip, at the day before we leave, we have another meeting, and that meeting of everybody, pilgrims and everybody deals with, what did you feel when you got here? What did you think about your time here? What have you had to say about it? And the pilgrims tell us, sometimes the kids do, they get up and they talk about what they felt, what they got out of the whole thing. So it's really a great experience that way. And also we have talent night. And talent night's a lot of fun because anybody can participate in talent night. And our pilgrims are amazing. I mean, you would not believe sometimes what they do. And we had one pilgrim, a year or two ago, she hardly could converse with anybody. But what a singing voice she had.
June of 23.
Was it June of 23?
Yes,
yeah. I was just astounded. I mean, I'll never forget her. It was just a shock. And you are amazed at what these young people can do, or what your sick patients can do, how they're very different. After a few days, Mike is nodding his head. After a few days, the people you came with, you can't believe are the same people. And when you're ready to take them home, it's even more so. They're a little saddened by leaving, and they tell you why they're saddened by leaving, but it's just a most joyous experience. I mean, sometimes I say, why do I keep doing this? Why do I keep doing it? I keep doing it because when are we ready to come back? And you see the joy on almost everybody's face. Right, Crystal? Mike says the same thing. Okay, so if you have any questions, we'd be glad to answer them. I hope I gave you a sort of a picture. I know it was sometimes repetitive. It's just that all I can say to you is if you wanted to do something worthwhile, especially you nursing students, this is something that it will be so rewarding. It really is. So it's a lot of work, but it's so rewarding. Thank you.
I wanted to tell you, so through all of these experiences that we had here, during the pandemic, my spiritual director made a joke that he said, God allowed the pandemic so I could stay home to write the book. So these are 20 stories of people who came that had life-changing experiences with us. There is one woman who was cured of Lou Gehrig's disease. There's other people cured of physical things, but these are also people who found extraordinary life-changing healings and cures and conversions that took place. So we have some books up front. If you're a student, this will, and you might be coming with us, this will tell you the kind of people who come on our pilgrimage. They're really broken people who come and how you care for them and how it changes their lives. If you're a student, take the book, please. If you're a medical professional, if you want to make a donation for it, you can, because all the money goes to Lourdes volunteers to bring us sick. But if you didn't bring anything with you, just take the book anyway and just read a little bit about the grace that happens of healing there and how medicine really has the opportunity to live the fullness of what you'd like to be doing on the pilgrimage. We also brought you some water from France. I just got off the plane a few days ago. My luggage got home yesterday after I got here. So there's Lourdes water out there. I know you're caring for the sick, so if you want to take some, you can do that. But we have two of our doctors, one of our head nurses here, so I don't know if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask.
Yes. I'll just share a story for the nurses. Hi, my name's Crystal. In 2017,
Can I ask you to go up front? Just because we're recording too.
in 2017, I was very frustrated with the healthcare system. I had been a nurse for 17 years, and I had kind of just reached this point where I sort of had it. I thought I was on my way out, and I thought, well, I'll do something as a thank you. I felt very blessed in my faith and with our family, and I thought, okay, I'll do something before I leave this healthcare field. Over it. Well, I was a member of the Catholic Nurses Association, and they had an ad on the website asking for nurse volunteers. So I signed up, and I went thinking that this was it for me. And what it did for me is it renewed my faith in what it is to take care of a human person. You get in the healthcare system, and I've always worked hospital, acute care nursing, and I had forgotten why I became a nurse, and it let me see the human person again and the reason why I became a nurse. And I'm forever grateful for this organization. And I'm still working in a hospital now, and I just think that it reminds you of who we are as healthcare givers and who it is that we're there as the hands of Christ. So that's what I want to say.
You can find us on our website, or you can give us a call. And thank you so much for coming. I know you had a lot of choices of where you could go. We're grateful you came.
We'll take a short break and then Dr. Smith will continue.